Welcome to Mocktails and Masterpieces with the Indianapolis Chamber Orchestra, sponsored by Anthony Shefferly and Associates.
Greetings, everyone. Matthew Kramer here. We're gearing up for another performance in the Indianapolis Chamber Orchestra's 21-22 concert season. Next week, we return to the Schroeder, our first concert in the new year, with a performance that is almost 2 years in the making. I'm not joking about that. Due to COVID, we have rescheduled so many of our performances, but we are absolutely thrilled that this performance is returning to the stage. James Aikman's new concerto for the Prism Saxophone Quartet. I'm joined right now by James. Great to see you, James. How have you been?
Likewise, been well, thank you. In spite of it all, the fact that we're here is is saying something. Grateful for the small things anymore.
Well, we're here to talk about this marvelous new concerto that you've written. First, a little bit of background. You've been the composer in residence of the Indianapolis Chamber Orchestra for just under a decade now, and a number of works you've written for our orchestra, including that incredible work, which I was fortunate to premiere in my first season, your Peacemakers, a filmic oratorio, as you call it. That was such a monumental undertaking. Really, as I've always said, the biggest work that the orchestra has ever played. In sheer forces alone in complexity. And then just recently, not recently, it's been a few years already, a beautiful viola concerto written specifically for our principal violist, Chaba Daly. And now we come back, your fourth composition, I believe, for the chamber orchestra is another concerto. So let's talk a little bit about this format, which is pretty unique, I want to say. I mean, quartets with orchestra, not so unique. There's Rodrigo guitar and Vivaldi concertos and Mozart Sinfonia Concerto, but 4 saxophones out in front of the chamber orchestra. I'm sure you were barely done with your last commission and all the other works you're working on, that this started to gestate. How did this idea come up for this work with our orchestra?
Well, oh man, there's so many various influences over my life. Fred Fox, for instance, my teacher at Indiana, was a sax player in his youth and studied with Lawrence Teal. Larry Teal was the father, it turns out, of American classical saxophone. And he taught Don Cinta at the University of Michigan, where all of Prism's members happened to meet, decades ago as students and formed the ensemble there. So it's a small world, and at the same time, there's the amazing, dedication and solidity and professionalism of all saxophone players that exist now. Because, in addition to the jazz world, in which that's another wonderful, vibrant, introduction to the saxophone. Not just introduction. I mean, there's a wealth of material there for everybody, with John Coltrane, Charlie Parker. Anyway, I grew up with that stuff, and Love Supreme is still etched in my mind and spiritual views. And anyway, but working with Fred Fox at IU, I realized and heard firsthand, the astounding dedication of the American, principally the classical players. And I didn't know too much about it. And then, so I was hearing these wonderful players, and Eugene Rousseau, who was the director of the ensemble there, of saxophone, and also professor of saxophone, and he was an amazing person as well. And I think he's up in Minnesota now, but he directed my first saxophone quartet. And Fred urged me, you've got to write for saxophone, and so I did, and I was grateful to have done so, and just had a great experience. It turns out that Otis Murphy, who is going to play tenor sax on this piece with Prism, took Eugene Rousseau's position there as one of the youngest ever at Jacobs School, ever appointed. So Otis Murphy, just an astounding player. So we're lucky to have him there. And also there's Julian Velasco, who is a student at Northwestern, just winning all kinds of praise in New York Times and Chicago Tribune. He's sitting in on soprano saxophone, and just he's coming out with a new record, and just like I say, he's got press all over the place, and he was one of the bang on the can guys over the summer, which is a big festival in New York. And so anyway, to make a long story short, I think there's just a myriad of different influences that come out of my impression of saxophone, to say nothing of having lost my teacher Louis Andriessen over the summer. He, in just about all of his pieces, included a saxophone section. So it was his goal, to eventually have a sax section in just about every orchestra. So I think that makes a whole heck of a lot of sense, because you have the reed element of the embouchure, and then also the brass element. So it's a perfect blending, instrument for so many uses. And it also adds a character to the ensemble that livens it up to me. And I think, if nothing else, this concerto with the four guys playing saxophone out in front, it's a tribute to the absolute musicianship of the saxophonists across the world, as well as it includes the ensemble within the orchestra, which for me, for the life of me, I don't know why it's not there now. The clarinet came out and all of a sudden it was incorporated into the orchestra. So I think the same thing will eventually happen, with saxophones.
I'm glad that you mentioned that, because I say that quite often at education concerts with children, asking which instruments in the orchestra, and children recognize the saxophone, and so they ask, is the saxophone a member of the orchestra? And then we have to always say it's just a kind of infrequent friend that comes in every once in a while, whether it's Lieutenant Kiji or symphonic dances of Rachmaninoff. I mean, there are wonderful, of course, Bolero comes to mind. There are many great examples, but they're infrequent. They're not. And so you're absolutely right. That warmth, if you think of the Cole Porter plays, the dance bands, the big bands, that beautiful sonority that is only created with a saxophone quartet or a section. So that's a great point. And you also mentioned Prism, which I feel neglected to mention at the beginning. This was written specifically for the Prism Saxophone Quartet, which is an outstanding ensemble, certainly the premier saxophone quartet. I had the great pleasure of working with Tim McAllister a number of years ago. He's been premiering almost everybody's saxophone concertos, John Adams, the list goes on. But this piece, if you could talk to us, as you already have, but their commitment to new music and how they just jumped right on board this project. Their list of premieres and commissions is extensive.
It truly is. They're just an amazing ensemble. They won just about everything, Grammys, number of Grammys. They've, deservedly so. And then the Fischoff chamber music competition, which is one of the major ones for chamber music, and they've been honored by Musical America. They're first rate in every regard. They're just an amazing ensemble, and they've been dedicated to the commissioning of new music for years. I mean, that's how they get their repertoire, because there's not a whole lot of centuries of repertoire like we have with violins and so forth, with the concerti for piano and so forth. So with this ensemble, it was initiated with the Indiana Historical Society, a concert downtown that I happened to attend. It was a packed house, and they're so good in the way they present works. It was just them, the quartet alone. And they would, each one of them present, they're each professors at various universities, and they would each present a various aspect of the piece we were about to hear. And, so I think it was totally entertaining for the audience as well. But the musicianship of the players is on a par with the absolute highest that's going on in the world today. And I don't say that lightly. I'm pretty critical about most music, and at least a little something I've got to criticize. There's not much there to criticize with Prism. They're just an outstanding ensemble, and everybody. Just look at the list of players, and also look at the composers who've written for them. It's just astounding.
And it's not your first time writing for a member of Prism as well. We've got an excerpt we're going to play now. I'm going to let you set it up, but this is an excerpt from your saxophone concerto.
Yeah. Tamer Sullivan, who's their artistic director and bari player, years ago, we met through the International Society of Contemporary Music. A Piece of Mine won the national competition here in New York City, and it was premiered in Merkin Hall, and it had a part for saxophone. And Tamer played that. That was in the year 2000. So I've known Tamer since 2000. And when an opportunity came up to record a concerto album of my violin concerto and the alto sax concerto, I thought immediately of Tamer. So Tamer flew over to St. Petersburg and premiered the work, and it was a rousing success, I must say. And due to just his enthusiasm and the level of commitment and the respect that he earned, by being there and meeting, and the camaraderie that came about through the interaction of the musicians. And the beautiful thing about music is it truly is an international language. And, with Russian speaking versus, and they speak much better English than we do Russian, but still it was a beautiful interaction. You could sense the genuineness of everyone wanting to do their best.
Well, here's an excerpt from James Aikman's saxophone concerto. back now, James. I just want to ask you specifically about the piece for the audience that
The new
comes
one.
next week to hear this performance. What can they expect from this new work?
Well, the new work, it's got, of course, the saxophone quartet as the primary soloist. So that presents some things to a composer who thinks about it a little while. And so the initial driving force, I thought, would be very imperative. This was composed in the fall of 2019. Remember the angst and everything that was unsettling at that time. And I had initially written a much different piece, including some, some more lyrical type of music. But this just took over, and it made me realize that, something's awry. And there was this impending sense of something, has to be confronted here. So I created this opposition, this initial alarming sort of attention-getting beginning of straight ahead, repeated eighth notes at 160, and then against that comes this syncopation that sneaks in a little bit during those straight ahead passages, but then the syncopation becomes its own section. So it becomes a rondo where we have one section that's straight ahead, rhythmic driving intensity, and then one that's based on a much more syncopated music. And those two interact. Finally, it comes into this more lyrical sort of overlapping music where the lines stretch out, and there you can hear things in diminution and augmentation, and then straight ahead in the same lyrical way that you normally would. And then this continues on, and there's some mysterioso sections, and there's parts of the music always when I compose that are graces. They aren't anything that I came up with. They're just, I must say that at times in the heat of the creative activity, it is a grace to receive some of these things because it's not me. Anyway, after some of this mysterioso stuff, I thought, okay, this is a perfect lead up to a dramatic moment, which is followed by the first cadenza. So the first cadenza is soprano saxophone. And then that leads into this cacophonous sort of non-driving. The only part of the piece that's that non-driving are the cadenzas. The second cadenza is for bari sax, starting from the depths and building upward, and then coming out of that and back into this same sort of aleatoric cacophonous, as if you're in the woods and you hear all the animals start chirping and chattering at once. And then that builds up to a silence, and from that, the timpani takes over in a motive that we've heard throughout the piece, but it's kind of cool to hear it on timpani, I must say. And anyway, that builds in intensity toward the ending. And it's a rocket ship kind of ending with everyone playing incredibly quick and passage work and together in tightly knit materials that I just can't wait to hear it. I'm excited to hear this piece again, especially after a couple of years. I forgot about it, honestly. I listen again. Oh, yeah.
2 years in the making. Thank you for that description. And now I know where you get the name Alarm, which is what you've entitled this concerto. And on paper, it just looks like that rocket ship that you're talking about here. And the virtuosity is all over every page here. So, you're in great hands. Of course, our marvelous orchestra, but the Prism Saxophone Quartet. James, we're really looking forward to this. Next week, James Aikman's premiere of Alarm for Prism and the Indianapolis Chamber Orchestra. We're going to go out now actually with another James Aikman excerpt, this one from that Peacemakers, which I referenced earlier. Just a tremendous memory that I have, and I know all of our musicians share as well. And this was a regional Emmy Award winning production here, which we're just so thrilled of. It's a real feather in our cap, your cap, and for everyone really in Indianapolis here who was present at that concert. So thanks again, ladies and gentlemen, for tuning in for a little bit of time with our marvelous composer in residence, James Aikman. James, I'll see you next week at the concert.
Thank you so much. It's truly an honor and always is to work with such great musicians, and yourself included, of course. Thank you so much.
Thank you, James. Thanks, everyone.
Martin Luther King Jr., on the occasion of being the youngest recipient of the Nobel Peace Prize, said, "Sooner or later, all the people of the world will have to discover a way to live together in peace, and thereby transform this pending cosmic elegy into a creative psalm of brotherhood. If this is to be achieved, man must evolve for all human conflict a method which rejects revenge, aggression, and retaliation. The foundation of such a method is love."
Some time ago, my brother and I were driving one evening. He was driving the car, and for some reason the drivers were very discourteous that night. They didn't dim their lights. Hardly any driver that passed by dimmed his lights. And I remember very vividly my brother A.D. looked over and in a tone of anger said, "I know what I'm going to do. The next car that comes along here and refuses to dim the lights, I'm going to fail to dim mine and pour them on in all their power." And I looked at him right quick and said, "Oh no, don't do that. There'd be too much light on this highway, and it will end up in mutual destruction for all. Somebody got to have some sense on this highway. Somebody must have sense enough to dim the lights. And that's the trouble, isn't it?" Men must see that force begets force, hate begets hate, toughness begets toughness, and it is all a descending spiral, ultimately ending in destruction for all and everybody. Somebody must have sense enough and morality enough to cut off the chain of hate and the chain of evil in the universe. And you do that by love.